Latex.
Nice.
Changed is a relatively obscure RPG that I discovered a week ago. The game was made by a Japanese furry with what can be described as a kink for latex goo transformation. That's right, Changed is a latex transformation furry game. I didn't know this fact at the time of hearing about it, or when I purchased it, but it soon became abundantly clear after the first few minutes of gameplay. Now, you're not the only one wondering what would compel me to not only purchase and complete the game, but go on to write and edit a video essay review of it. I've never had any fetishistic inclination for latex goo.
At least I didn't before playing the game.
The only other time I've encountered transformation in this context was when I played the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series when I was younger. The only reason I'm doing any of this is probably because I love blasting rope to furry porn, so playing and later musing on a furry game is most likely a natural consequence of such a passionate proclivity. The game is similar to Waxworks, an old DOS Amiga game in the fact that they both offer gratuitous game over scenes. But instead of Waxworks' nightmare-fueling death scenes, Changed offers fetish-fueling transformation scenes. In the game, you play as a weak soy boy whose fastest form of movement is a brisk walk. There is no traditional combat, neither real-time nor turn-based. Combat revolves around avoiding and juking enemy AI and then dying repeatedly until you get lucky enough to get past them. The enemy's goal is to assimilate you, which basically means turning you into a goo monster. The poorly translated in-game lore explains it as transferring, where you still retain your memories and overall personality, but you are no longer yourself. From what I can tell, you lose your free will, which is a fate about as bad as death. Instead of fighting back like a hunk master, you run away like little soy boy. Speaking of the aforementioned translation, the game was released in April completely in Japanese. The English patch was released about a month after in May. The English patch is at least intelligible, but it's still pretty rough. Playing through it in English, it was clear that multiple tidbits were lost in translation, but I was able to get the general idea of what happened in the story. I also stumbled across several hilarious sentences that came across as absolute nonsense. I should also mention the music. The mostly chiptune soundtrack for this game is really good. I'm definitely considering buying it, especially since it's only $2. There are plenty of good songs that I find stuck in my head after completing the game. You can definitely hear a Mother or Earthboundy theme going on in some of the tracks too, so bonus points for that. The movement in this game feels unresponsive, which isn't a good thing, especially when the entire game revolves around dodging enemies. There's so many chase sequences where you have to run away from a ridiculously fast enemy while at the same time dodging puddles of deadly goo and finding your way through a maze of boxes. Half the time you die because you can't really control the main character too well and the AI catches up to you. This issue is further exacerbated by the sometimes confusing perspective and positioning of the obstacles in your way. I naturally dislike games where there's no option, no matter how unfeasible, of fighting back. I'm not asking for a power fantasy, but for a game that features multiple ways of problem solving that don't always involve running away. What I'm saying is that both a fight or flight response system would be nice. If the game's flight mechanic actually featured responsive, non-janky movement and better perspective, I wouldn't complain as much and would be happier with the current product. But at the moment, moving, especially running, is strange and floaty, making it hard to maneuver through a maze of boxes when the perspective is so strange. A cool justification for a fighting mechanic would be to explain that a consequence of the semi-sentient latex is that it's now a non-Newtonian fluid, similar to cornstarch. And you can take a hammer or another blunt object and smash or stun the monsters until they become inert and harmless, which would give you multiple options to deal with encounters and a backup in case you get unlucky with a ridiculous AI. The game probably handwaves this away by saying that your character is weak most of the time, but there's at least one moment in the game where you destroy an enemy by opening a door on it. There is the occasional door passcode puzzle in the game. These are pretty obscure and difficult. I want to chalk it up to the poor translation. The game does give you hints on the little pieces of paper you find scattered around the facility, but they're so poorly translated you can barely understand the dev's intent or what you're supposed to do. You don't even know where to look half the time. I had to use a guide to complete the game, and you will too. The game story is fairly fleshed out. You wake up in an abandoned lab complex and soon find yourself assailed on all sides by goo monsters that are trying to transform you. After overcoming many obstacles, you eventually pass out and meet up with a goo monster that isn't outright hostile towards you, although he is a bit condescending when he calls you weak. The goo monster's name is Pyro, and as far as anyone knows, he's the only monster that can talk. It's never really explained why. Interacting with Pyro in a certain way is vital to unlocking the best ending in the game. He helps you out occasionally, and you have to choose the dialogue option that involves thanking him or just being appreciative in general. He appreciates your gratitude and grows to like you. The both of you progress down a few levels, including a water stage. Near the end of that level, if you weren't nice enough to Pyro, he'll transform you out of fear of losing the last human host and dying. If you thanked him enough times, he just says a few lines of dialogue about not wanting to transform you and how he wants to come with you to see the outside world. Just after this scene, all the tidbits of lore you collected earlier come together and crash over your head. You've been kidnapped and have been in stasis for 5 years in an abandoned lab whose original purpose was to find a cure for a virus that was devastating the human population. They tried to transform humans into animals with latex goo so that the virus wouldn't have any effect on them. The goo had a mind of its own and wreaked havoc on multiple test subjects and staff members, to the point where everyone died and the building fell into disrepair for the past 5 years. That disrepair is what led to a power failure which awoke you from stasis. It seems as though you're the last human left alive. You go through a floor entirely coated in white latex. The enemies here are so cancer it takes like an hour to get past them if you're lucky. Immediately after this segment, you encounter a transferred doctor. He was once a human but had to transform to survive the virus. Apparently the injection he used wasn't flawed and didn't have any detrimental effects, allowing him to keep his free will. He tells you that you might be a carrier for the virus. He can't tell for sure though, because all the detection equipment was destroyed years ago. He tries to stop you from leaving and locks you up. He tells you that there is a small population of wealthy elite humans in a bunker who survived the virus and are eventually going to rebuild the planet. He doesn't want you to leave the building out of fear that you'll ruin their plans. Piro tries to rescue you and fights the doctor. Depending on how nice you were to Piro, he either wins the fight or dies trying. If he dies, the doctor knocks you out and transforms you, mentioning brain modifications in order to make you an obedient pet to keep him company. This change of events is somewhat sadistic and out of character for the doctor. It's also one of the worst endings. If Piro wins, the doctor gets his face stoved in on a filing cabinet. The two of you continue to the bottom floor lobby until you confront the doctor again, who is too weak to stop you, but beseeches you to consider the consequences of leaving, and that if you actually are a carrier for the virus, you will fuck everything up again. You have 3 options here. You can stay, devastating Piro, who leaves on his own to the outside world, leaving you to either live with the doctor or go back into stasis until he finds a cure for the virus. You can leave with Piro, which is probably the best ending since you stay human but soon die from exhaustion. If you press the escape button, the doctor tells you about the serum he used to transform and how if he gives it to you, it will probably destroy the virus. You choose to go through with it and are transformed, and then leave the lab with Piro to the ruins of the outside world. This is widely considered to be the best ending. Now I know I'm being critical of the game, but the truth is that it's grown on me despite being a weird furry game. It's hard to make games. It's hard to sell them. Making and selling a niche furry game is harder. I appreciate the game for what it is despite its flaws, and would recommend it if you enjoy strange RPGs or if you blast as much rope to furry porn as I do. Aw, fuck me. That's enough of this game. Fuck this. God damn it. Oh, fuck! Well, I guess let's transition into our porn review, baby. Oh, this is straight from the game. Okay, never mind that. This is fucking gross. Hyper is really fucking gross. That's kind of cute. This is also really fucking gross. I don't know what that is. That's not porn. Barely any of this is porn. Aw, yeah, there we go. Now we're talking. This is alright, I guess. I don't know, dude. A lot of this is safe or questionable. Damn, that boy's got a thick dick. Nice. Dude, nice. Damn, nice. Nice, people. Good shit. What the fuck? Hell yeah. Okay.